In the of the Rebbe to learn Hilchos Beis Abchira in the days when we Tzorim, we have the honor today to have a Choshev in German from the senior Melamdim in the Yeshiva, Harav Chosid, Harav Chaim Berkowitz is going to give us some insights into Beis Abchira. Before we start giving the shir, everybody should give tzedakah b'tzibur as the Rav the Rebbe. Harav Berkowitz, bevakasha.
We Baruch Hashem have a very nice day camp here called Machne Mנחem. I'm sure you saw boys with the blue shirts, pamphlets running around all over the place here. I was given the very special zchus to learn with the Talmidim of the Bank Aleph, which is Kita Aleph. Throughout the year, they just started learning Chumash. They finished 2 parshas already. They started learning a little bit of Rashi. And here's that it's summer, so we want to do something special in the learning. The idea of starting them on Mishnayos came up. And which Mishnayos do you learn? Obviously, we're going to learn Mishnayos Midas, because this is what the Rebbe wants us to learn during the time of the 3 weeks. Usually the summer comes out at the same time, and learn about the Beis HaMikdash. And so we started this, and Baruch Hashem, the learning went very well. The learning is very well. They really enjoy and are excited learning about the Beis HaMikdash, not the Mishnayos. As a matter of fact, some of them learned the Mishnah's Baal Peh with the Taich. So when we learn with young Talmidim especially, we have to realize that young Talmidim have an imagination, and we all have imaginations, but young Talmidim imaginations, we have to know that sometimes those imaginations work very well with what we're learning. Sometimes they can conflict a little bit, so we have to keep in mind that we have to bring that to their attention. Another interesting thing we see, sometimes we see something that seems to be a very minor detail, but when we start looking into it, we start seeing one leads to the other, and there's many inyan that come out of this that related, like we'll see in the Mishnah about the Beis HaMikdash. So when we go through the first 2 Mishnahs, I'm going to come on something that seems to be a very minor detail, but actually one thing brings into another thing, and we'll try to share all that with you. So the first Mishnah starts off telling us that in the 3 places where the Kehanim are guarding the Beis HaMikdash and the Beis HaMikdash, normally it's usually the Leviim that guard, but we learn out, as the Gemara says in the beginning of Masechta Stamid, how we learn out that also the Kehanim have to guard in 3 places. So these 3 places are Beis Haftinas, the Beis Haftinas, the Beis HaNitzites, in the Beis HaNitzites, and the Beis HaMoiked, and in the Beis HaMoiked. We'll soon go into the detail of explaining every place, because it's going to help us understand many other things that come out of this. And then Ba'al-Leviim, and the Leviim guard Be'esim Ve'echad Mokayim in 21 places. 5 Leviim are guarding Al Chamisha Shari Harabayis on the 5 gates in the Harabayis, by the 5 gates of the Harabayis. 4 Leviim al Arba Pinaisav on the 4 corners Mitoy Chayfin, it's inside. As we know that the Harabayis is like a platform, a high platform, so you could be guarding by a corner, the outside corner or the inside corner. So the Mishnah says that the guard that was guarding by the Harabayis was guarding in the inside corner. He was like on top of the platform. Chamisha, there are another 5 Leviim al Chamisha Shari Hazara. We're moving more into the area of the Hazara. So there are 5 Leviim guarding by the 5 gates of the Hazara. Arba and 4 al Arba Panaseh Mibachutz. 4 Leviim are guarding the 4 corners, but here they're guarding it from the outside, not from the inside like by the Harabayis. Then the Mishnah concludes to say, Ve'echad, and 1 guard Belishkas HaKarban, the place called Belishkas HaKarban. Ve'echad, and 1 Levi Belishkas HaPareches is guarding by the Belishkas HaPareches. Ve'echad, and 1 Levi is guarding La'chayde Beis HaKaperes, behind the Beis HaKaperes. We'll soon explain these places, and we'll see some interesting things that come out of this. Now, a child imagines a guard. He thinks about the stories you heard about in King's Palace, a guard standing firm, strong, erect. He's holding his weapon and his flag or whatever, and he's guarding a king's palace. Keeping that in mind, let's go to the next Mishnah. Ish Harabayis. There's a person who's in charge of the Harabayis. He was Chazer, was going around. I'll call Mishmar and Mishmar by every guarding. Ba'avukais, and there were fires and flames. Doilkim, torches, Doilkim Lefanav were lighting before him. B'chol Mishmar, and every guard, Sheinu Aymed, that's not standing. Aymed Ish Harabayis, Shalom Alecha. Ish Harabayis tells him Shalom Alecha. Like the Ferisel explains, he gives him a wake-up call. He says, what are you doing? You're supposed to be standing. Nikar, if he realizes Shu Yashin, he sees that he's sleeping, he would bang him with a stick, or he had permission to to burn his clothing. Obviously, it doesn't mean his clothing while he's wearing it. It means, as this explained, if he took off his upper clothing and he made out of it a blanket or something, then they would burn his burn that for him. And when such a thing would happen, the guards would tell one to the other, "Makol ba'azara, what's this noise that's going on in the azara?" And they would answer to each other, "Kol ben Levi leika." This is the sound of a Levi that's getting hit. The begad of Nesrafim, his clothing are getting burnt. Sheyashin loyal mishmari, because he's sleeping by his guarding. Then the Mishnah concludes by saying, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, "Pamachas matzves achiyim yoshin b'sarfos ksusei." This is not just a story that the warning is something that actually happened with the brother of my mother, and they found him sleeping and they burnt his clothing. Taking a look at the Rav explains the area we're going to focus on is where he says, Al arba pinasehem b'bachutz. So why is it that by the Harabayas, the guard was guarding from inside, and by the Azara, he was guarding from the outside? So he says like this, Lefisha ein yeshiva ba'azara. We're not allowed to sit in the Azara, Elo l'malchus beis David, only to the kings that come from the family of David HaMelech. Bilvad. And then he says, V'loi hoya efsher lishmer l'shaymer or lishmer ba'amida kol halayla. It's impossible to be standing a whole night and guarding. Lefichach, therefore, hoya shaymrim b'pinai sa'azara v'chein shaymrim b'sharei azara shaymrim b'bachutz. That's why they were guarding from the outside. They should be able to sit. So right away, we have to explain to the child, no, you think the guard is always standing. No, the guards were sitting. They were very generous to the guards, and the guards were sitting. So they have to imagine the guard sitting. Okay, very nice. How does then go the second Mishnah? With the second Mishnah, it says that the Ishar Abayis would go around, and the whole Mishmar Seina Oimid, any guard that's not standing, the Ishar Abayis is going to tell them Shalom Alecha. They don't have to stand, they could be sitting. So right away we could really say that Oimid not necessarily has to mean standing, it could mean standing up. And we would say is that the guards are allowed to sit, but when the guard sees the Ishar Abayis coming, because he's a very respectful person, so Oimid, he has to stand up. And any guard that's not standing up, that means that probably he's a little bit not paying attention to what's going on. Then the Ishar Abayis would just tell him Shalom Alecha, and then if he sees that he's sleeping, which can happen when someone is sitting and he's sleeping, so then Chayv Tibbamakli and so on would go on. And Emerson is that in the Gemara, in Masechtas Tamid, which Masechtas Tamid is actually parallel, pretty much, at least in the beginning, with Masechtas Midas. As the Rebbe explains that the difference is that the Masechtas Midas is mainly about the measurements of the Beis HaMikdash, the chefs of the Beis HaMikdash. Unlike Masechtas Tamid, is more legada de avoda. So he says actually over here something very, the Gemara, this is on Daf, Chav Zayin Amud Beis, on the bottom, he says that Ishar Abayis and Mechazel al Kol Mishmar and Mishmar, Vavuka is Tolkas Lafonov, V'chol Mishmar she'ena Oimed V'oimer. He adds a Vav. I think a Vav. What's the difference? V'oimer. The Mishnah said Oimer. V'oimer, the question is who's saying it? Here is mashma that the guard has to say the words Ish Harabayis Shalom Alecha. Like it says, V'oimer loi Ish Harabayis Shalom Alecha. Before we thought that it means is that the Ishar Abayis says to him Shalom Alecha. But over here with the Vav, his mashma is that the guard who is sitting, when he sees the Ishar Abayis coming, he stands up and he greets the Ishar Abayis by saying Ishar Abayis Shalom Alecha. So he sees a whole big change about just from this diuk. Emerson is that the Rambam uses the same words, and the Rambam also says, this is in Perek Ches of Hilchos Beis HaBchira, Mamid Mamuna Echad al Kol Mishmar Sashayimlim, Ishar Abayis Hayim Nikra, V'Mechaz al Kol Mishmar Mishmar Kol Halayla, V'Vukas looks at the Lukas Lafonov, V'Chol Mishmar Sheina Oimed V'Oimer Loi, Ishar Abayis Shalom Alecha, Nikra Shu Yashin Chayv Tibbamakli. So we see that there's a whole difference how this is, although it seems to be a small detail, but still in all, the guard has to stand up and greet the Ishar Abayis by saying Ishar Abayis Shalom Alecha. What we have so far from this is that we see that just Shayimlim, the guards, are sitting because, like he says over here, he says the words over here, quotes, because it's not possible that now, if that's the case, then we have a little problem coming back to the beginning of the Mishnah. The beginning of the Mishnah says that there were 3 places where the Kahanim are guarding. And we're going to try to explain to you a little bit where these places are, because we're going to see that these places are actually in the Azara. So we're going to be stuck with a problem again. If it's in the Azara, how could the Kahanim guard there if they can't stand up, they have to sit? You're not allowed to sit in the Azara. Where are these 3 places? One place is the Beis Haftinas. We'll try to get a little summary where these places are. The Beis Haftinas is on a raised platform above the Shad HaMayim. The Shad HaMayim was on the southern eastern corner. That means you go into the Shad HaMayim, you're going to be right by the Kevesh HaMizbeach. It was called the Shar HaMayim because over there they would bring in water by the Nisach HaMayim. They would go and they would fetch water from the well, and then they would bring it up by that Shar. Also on that Shar there was a mikveh above. The Kohen Gadol would use it on Yom Kippur. Also there was a stream running under that Shar that they would use to wash the Azara, like it's mentioned in the Seder Karban Pesach. A lot of things going on over there. So above that Shar HaMayim was also the Beis Haftinas. The Beis Haftinas, this was the place where the Ketaitis was prepared. Haftinas, as we know, it's mentioned that he was the only one that knew the secret of the Malo Oshan. This was what's to say Malo Oshan Kolshi. This was a certain root or a certain something that they put in that made the smoke go perfectly up on the straight line and then spread out on the roof of the Kodesh HaKadoshim on Yom Kippur and so on. And he didn't want to give out the secret, and because of that it says some negative things about him in the Gemara. But eventually, when the Goyim wanted to get the secret after the Churban, they noticed that it was better that he didn't give out the secret. He would charge a tremendous amount of money to make the Ketaitis, and that's why the other Kahanim wanted to learn this. Anyways, that's what's mentioned about Haftina. So that's where the Ketaitis was prepared in that room over there. That was one place where the Kahanim were standing on top over there, because it was above the Shar HaMayim, and they were guarding over there. The next place is the Beis HaNitzos. The Beis HaNitzos is on the northwestern corner. But there was another Shar there called the Shar Yechonia, but right next to it was the Beis HaNitzos. Nitzos means a spark. And the Mishnah says, and the Mitzafin side was the Shar HaNitzos, it was built, it was like a porch, like a balcony, and there was a level built on top of it. It means it was a very tall, high Shar, and it was called Shar HaNitzos because when the sun would shine up from the Mizrach side, it would shine above onto the top of that Shar, and it looked like sparks over there, like a lot. So that's what they called it. One of the reasons that the Rosh mentions that's what it's called the Beis HaNitzos. Anyways, the Kohen was guarding above, and the Levi was guarding below. Now, just to mention, going back that the Beis Haftinas was similar also because below by the Shar HaMayim there was a Levi guarding, but the Levi was guarding outside of the Shar, and the Kohen was on the higher level, which is the Beis Haftinas. And then was the Beis HaMayked. The Beis HaMayked was on the north. Eastern side of was a huge building that says Beis HaMayked Kippah by his Gadol Haya. It was a huge building over there. There was a fire always burning for the Kahanim to warm up because they were walking without shoes and socks and so on. So they got very cold. So they had a fire burning there. The Kahanim would sleep there also at night before they would go to serve in the Beis HaMikdash the next day. And there were 4 rooms in the 4 corners. So the Mishnah says that there were 2 of them were in the Kodesh part and the Azara part, and 2 of them were outside of the Azara part. So in other words, is that the wall of the Azara kind of cut right through that room. It didn't actually physically cut through it, but there was Rashi Pispus, and it says there were the tops of the beams that stuck out, that from there you would make an imaginary line to see which part of the Azara, that part not allowed to sit and so on, and the other part, they actually were sleeping there. So that was the outside part. There were 4 rooms in the 4 corners. One of the rooms was called the Lishkas Taloye Carbon. That's where they would prepare the carbon tamid. The other room, there was also on the Kodesh part, was the Lishkas Oisa Lechem Apanim, they would prepare the Lechem Apanim. And on the northern side, which was out of the Azara part, was the Lishkas. Over there it says that the Mishnah says that over there Gonzu Bnei Chashmonai Yisavnei HaMizbeach Shashiktzum Malchei Yavan, when the kings of the Yavanim, they defiled the Mizbeach, they hid the stones over there. It's called the Lishkas HaChaismais over there, that anyone that wants to bring a carbon has to bring the Nesachim. And the Nesachim was hard to exactly measure how much, so what they would do is they would go in there and they would buy that kind of, it's like a coupon, like a ticket. They would set Egel on it, or would say Keves on it, and with that they would be able to go to the Lishkas Beis Shemanya, where they would get the whole package of their Nesachim that they would use. That was on the northern side, and then also there was another room on the northern side where they would go down to the Beis HaTfilah, they would go down to the mikveh, and so on. That was the Beis HaMayked. So over there, these 3 places is where the Kahanim were guarding. So the question comes, this is the Azara. So how could they sit? And if there's a cloud, then it's impossible. It's impossible. It makes no difference if it's a Kohen or it's a Levi. So it's an interesting thing what comes out from this. There's the Mefarish who explains the Mishnah, the Gemara, the Mishnah Gemara in Talmud. So he goes into explaining like this. He comes up with the interesting thing that he says, Hoya Aliyos, that both the Beis Haftinas and the Beis HaNitzos, as we know, is on a higher level. And he says because the Shomer has to guard like a Shomer of a city, which they stand there in a high tower and so on. And therefore, he was standing on a higher platform and so on. And then he mentions here also that there's a side benefit with this, because even if they were built in the Azara, Yechaylim Kaihanim Leishev Sham, the Kahanim could sit over there, when they're tired. The Gagin Vali is like this Kadoshu, because the klal is that the roofs and also the caves underneath, they don't have the kedusha of the azara. So therefore, because they're standing on the higher platform, they're allowed to sit over there. So that's not a problem. So that solves the problem with the kahanim, how they're able to guard. Now, that solves the problem as far as the Beis HaNitzos goes and as far as the Beis HaFinas goes, because both of them were higher elevations. What happens with the Beis HaMikdash? So it's interesting. The Beis HaMikdash, it says, was a kippah. Now, normally we learn pshat, the more Mepharshim say, the kippah means it was built like a dome. You see buildings, that was the kind of architecture in those days, nice big fancy buildings that had a big dome on top. The Mepharsh over here explains, he wants to bring out that there was an elevation over here also. So he says that also that kippah means that there was a kippah, it was built on a kippah, and therefore was elevated, and by being elevated, therefore the kohen was allowed to sit there. Afterwards, he asks the question, if that's the case, he says over here, Parchinen, he asks, let's see where he asks over here, that if that's the case, then it comes out that the Beis HaMikdash is chayil, it's not considered the azara, the Gagam Valiyas Lein is Kadoshu. So it says over there that two of those rooms were in the azara part, and if you're saying that it was elevated, it doesn't have the kedusha of the azara. So he answers is that this only applies when there's mamish elevation of a higher level. Here, it was the ground itself was like a kippah. That means the ground had like a hill in it. And therefore, if that's the case, if the ground itself gets elevated, then it still has the kedusha of the azara. Then it comes back to the question, how is the kohen able to sit over there? Anyways, on the Mishnah also, there's the Ravid. The older Gemaras, the Ravid was printed on this side of the page, but the newer ones, they're printed in the back over here. So the Ravid comes, and I'm just going to say, Bekitzer, what he says is, the Ravid says this whole thing doesn't apply. He says, first of all, he specially mentions the Beis HaFinas. The Beis HaFinas was a place where they prepared the Ketaitis, and the moment the Ketaitis comes into the Machteshas, that is that grinding bowl, it becomes Kaidish, it becomes Kedusha's Gufa. And Kedusha's Gufa is not, once it's Kaidish, it's not allowed to go out of the Azara. It becomes Nifsal B'yaitzer. So how could you say that the Beis HaFinas did not have a kedusha of the azara? If that's the case, then the ketaitis was going to become possible. And then he says another thing. He says is the fact itself that the Beis HaFinas and the Beis HaNitzos were built on the higher level also is not stamuzay. If something was a roof of a building, you could say it doesn't have the kedusha of the azara. Here they would have built it on the ground level. The problem was that it was very narrow there, and if they would build it there, it would be not possible to walk through. It would be very tsar mo'edi, would say. That's why they had no choice, and they built it above. But the means is, in other words, is that this does not mean that the kedusha doesn't go to above. In that case, the kedusha goes up to the above also. So the above was kodesh. So how do we fix up for the kahanim? The kahanim have to guard. How are they going to guard if they can't sit? So he answers over here, he says, Klola de Milsa, Nirin, Shekach, Hu, Bechol, Mokum, She'i Efshar, Lasis, Ba'azara, Shum Davar, Shehutzlach HaKasav, Lasis, Ba'azara, Ki in B'yeshiva, Zu, Yachel, Lasis, Bein Kayim, Bein Mishu. He says, because it was impossible, that's why they were exempt and they were allowed to sit over there, even though it's the Azara. So that answers everything. They have no problem anymore. Even with the Beis HaMikdash, you could say they were at ground level, they were in the Kedusha part, because it's impossible for them to stand and guard the whole time. That's why they were allowed to sit over there. Masha Inkin the Levi was able to stand outside of the Shar. So he stood by the Shar, but a little bit outside of it, which was not in the Azara, and that's why the Levi was able to sit there. But for the Kohen, they had to be given this reason, because it was impossible any other way. Now, coming with that, we have another big problem coming ahead, and that is by the end of Mishnah Aleph. The end of Mishnah Aleph, it tells us that there were three more Kaihanim, and three more Leviim. And the three Leviim, one of them was guarding in the Lishkas HaKarban. Where's the Lishkas HaKarban? Abi Pasha says the Lishkas, that's one of the rooms in the Beis HaMikdash, which was in the Kodesh part, and that was known as the Lishkas Taloy Karban, and that is in the Azara, and there's a Levi. The Levi shouldn't be in the Azara. The Echad B'Lishkas HaPareiches, one was guarding the Lishkas HaPareiches. So the Feres Yisrael says that I'm not sure where this place is. Let me just tell you Yud. Shesham Argim HaPareiches v'lo yadati Mekayma. V'kefi anira hoysa toich revach ha'azara ve'efsher shehoysa achas melamed ches to'im shesaviv ha'hechel. So he says it's possible this was one of the to'im. I don't know about the to'im were the walls that surrounded the hechal. Within those walls there were many compartments. And one of those compartments were called Toim. One of them was the Lishkas HaPareiches. That's what he says. Which that's in the Azara. It's not only in the Azara. It's just about within the walls of the Heichal. The Echad, and one of them was Lachayde Beis HaKapaydes, guarding behind the Beis HaKapaydes. Behind the Beis HaKaporos means behind the Kodesh HaKadoshim. There was actually a door over there, because the Gemara says in the Masechtas Zvachim that Kodesh HaKadoshim you can only shech the tzofin side. That had a designated area with the shech the karbonis. But Kodesh Kalim shechdasim b'chol mokam bazar. You could shech that anywhere. The only thing is it has to be by a Pesach Hayel Moed. It has to be by an opening. So they would make certain openings all along the ulam and the heichal and so on, and even behind the Kodesh HaKadoshim, so you should be able to shech any carbon. The mashal, the Yidden would come to do the carbon, the Shalmi Simcha and those things. They would cut shikalim, and they would be packed with Yidden all over. Everyone's going to be squeezed into one place. It's going to be a little difficult, so they were able to shecht it all around the heichal. So they had a door over there by that place, and over there he was guarding. All these places are mamish in the Azar. So how are we going to answer for the Levi? The Levi has to sit over there. So are we going to say the Levi could sit there? Well, the Rambam says it very clearly, and he says in the same Perek Ches Halacha Daled Mitzvahs Shmirasai Sheyeh Kahanim Shayim Bebifnim VaHalavim Bebachutz. The klal is that the Kahanim are outside and the Leviim are inside. And so here it seems to be that the Leviim are in the Azar. The Rebbe brings down also, quotes down in the Sikha of this is Chelik Yud Gimel. Sicham Parshas Kairach, it speaks about the Hesach Hadas, why the Shemim are guarding at night and so on. And the Rebbe brings down, and it's also, it's printed over here in italics, the Shemim Bebafnim, HaKehanim Bebafnim, VeHalavim Shemim Bebachutz. So how do we answer that? So the Rebbe over here in part of 56, the Rebbe quotes a sefer, the Rebbe says, the A, you see over here where it says, the A, Ezras Kohanim. Sefer called the Ezras Kahanim. I managed to find that sefer actually, and I took a look over there what he says there. So he says very, very simply, like he just says regarding this thing that the Leviim have to be outside. He says, they weren't mamish guarding in the Azara. They were outside. Like the klaus that they guard outside, but they were connected. They were adjacent to that place, or maybe they were focusing to that place. They were looking at that place and guarding that place, but they were actually standing outside. Something interesting came back to my mind when I was a bacher. It was around in the early mems. There was a time that there was a police by the Rebbe's house always, and then for some reason the city just took it away. So we made up at the bacher and between each other. We made up that we're going to take shifts guarding the Rebbe's house Shabbos night. So it was a very big schus. I remember when I was told that I'm going to do a night shift, and my place with the guard was going to be the back of the Rebbe's house. So there was one bacher that's going to be by the front, and one bacher by the back. And we didn't stand in the Rebbe's backyard or in the Rebbe's front yard. There was a building right next to it, and I guess they owned that building, and the bacher that was guarding the front was standing in the building by the windowsill looking at the front, and I was standing by the back windowsill looking at the back the whole time. We had svarim to be able to look into a sikha, mimer, but we were focusing every few moments looking on the back over there. So I just reminded myself is that over here also is that the lady was standing actually outside, but he was focused on looking at that place in the inside. If we have a few more moments, I just want to add. Have a little bit, 2 more moments. Just one more thing to bring up. An interesting question that comes up. With all this said, because it answers and makes a clarkite in all these places that were guarded. If you remember the second mission, it says